What if I told you the reason you're afraid of debt is the exact reason the rich get richer? Most people think debt is dangerous. The wealthy think debt is a weapon. And today, I'm going to show you the difference. If you've ever been told, pay off all debt immediately, credit cards are evil, loans will ruin your life, you were taught survival advice. The rich were taught strategy, and those two mindsets create two completely different financial futures. Here's the first thing you must understand. There are two types of debt. Bad debt makes you poorer, good debt makes you richer. Most people only experience bad debt. Credit card debt at 25% interest, car loans for depreciating vehicles, EMIs for things that lose value. That's consumption debt. The wealthy use cash flow debt, debt that buys assets, and assets produce money. Let me explain leverage in the simplest way possible. Imagine you have $100,000. Most people would buy a house in cash. The wealthy, they put 20% down and borrow the rest. Why? Because now instead of owning one house, they control 5. If each property increases 5% in value, the return is not 5%, it's magnified. That's leverage. Debt amplifies returns, but here's the key. It also amplifies risk, and that's why most people shouldn't copy it blindly. Here's the real secret: control without ownership. The rich don't focus on owning everything, they focus on controlling assets. Look at real estate investors, look at private equity firms, look at corporations. They use borrowed money to control large assets that generate predictable cash flow. For example, a rental property produces $2,000 per month. Mortgage payment is $1,500. They pocket $500. They didn't use their full capital. The tenant pays the loan, the asset appreciates. Over time, inflation makes the debt cheaper. That's long-term strategic debt. Here's why most middle-class people fear debt. Because most people experience debt emotionally. They see stress, collectors, minimum payments, interest traps. But that's because they borrow for lifestyle upgrades. The wealthy borrow for income expansion. Huge difference. Debt used for consumption is liability. Debt used for production is leverage. And that mindset shift changes everything. Here's something most people don't realize. Banks don't fear debt. Banks create debt. Every mortgage, business loan, or credit line is profit for them. So if debt was inherently evil, why are the largest institutions in the world built on it? Because debt is a tool. Like fire. Use it wrong, it burns you. Use it right, it powers cities. The tax advantage nobody talks about. In many countries, interest on business loans is tax deductible, meaning the government subsidizes productive debt. Businesses borrow to expand, expansion increases revenue, revenue increases economic growth. The system rewards productive leverage. That's why corporations carry billions in debt. It's structured, it's calculated, it's strategic. The danger zone. Listen carefully. Now, here's where most finance videos lie to you. They glamorize leverage without explaining risk. If your investment drops, if your income stops, if the market crashes, debt doesn't disappear. In fact, during downturns, leverage destroys overextended investors. That's why smart investors maintain cash reserves, never over-leverage, borrow against stable assets, and use fixed rates when possible. Debt is powerful, but only when controlled. Real example. Let's compare two people. Person A saves for 10 years, buys one property in cash. Person B uses 20% down and buys 5 properties, uses rental income to cover loans. After 10 years of appreciation, Person B likely controls more total equity, but they also took more calculated risk. This is the wealth gap in action. Why schools don't teach this? Because leverage requires discipline, and discipline is rare. It's easier to teach, stay out of debt, save slowly, play safe. That advice protects people, but it doesn't create outsized wealth. Wealth often comes from controlled risk, not recklessness, not gambling, but strategic leverage. So, should you use debt? Here's the honest answer. If you struggle with budgeting, carry high-interest consumer debt, don't understand cash flow, then no, master fundamentals first. But if you understand assets, can calculate risk, have emergency reserves, invest for long-term cash flow, then debt becomes a growth accelerator. Final thought. The rich don't love debt. They love what debt allows them to control. Debt isn't power. Control is power, and debt is just one way to access it.